Shalom, shalom, everyone. This is Teddy Wilson here at Seekers of Yahweh Ministries. And I wanted to shoot this live clip. I've had so many uproars and upheavals on social media over this Hanukkah thing. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to explain to everyone that you have to be very, very careful what you say about this Hebrew word. It's not an event. It has been turned into an event, but this Hebrew word Hanukkah, or anything in its roots, we need to be very, very careful about what we say this this word is connected to. Now, many of you are saying that it is pagan, it is this, it is that. Now, you got to be very careful, okay? If you do not know the history and how this was originally, and that's something I want to go over. I want to bring to light the history, and I'm going to be reading out of the Hebrew again. I'm going to be reading out of my Tanakh. First, I'm going to read, because somebody said, well, I've seen several others use this as well, that the word very clearly says not to add to nor take away from. Now, in your English thinking, you're right to say that. However, I'm going to show you what the Hebrew says and what the definitions of that are when it says in Deuteronomy chapter 4, do not add to the word which he commanded, nor shall you take away or add to it. Now, what we need to understand is they were specifically talking about things that had been written up to that point, because Moshe was about to leave the scene. And if you know your history, Yahushua or Joshua ben Nun added to the book himself. It specifically says in the book of Joshua that he added to the writings. So you need to understand what the Hebrew was saying here before you go making accusations like that. Because I will submit this. I do not believe that the Torah was meant to stop being added to in the sense of instructions. Okay, we know that there are already, the feasts have already been outlined within the 23rd chapter of Leviticus. This goes without saying. We already all know that. So did Moshe whenever he uttered these words in chapter 4, and the Spirit of Yah was the one that was leading him to pen these Devarim, which was a compilation and a recap of all of the words that Yahweh had ever spoke to Moshe between Exodus and Numbers. Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. That's why they call this one Deuteronomy or Devarim in the Hebrew, because it was a compilation of a recollection by Moshe, because he was about to check out. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit of history. I want to pray before we do this. And everybody, please don't think I'm poking at anyone or saying that I know it more important, or because I am not. I am simply going to read. I'm going to take Deuteronomy 4, chapter 2, and I'm going to read it to you in Hebrew. Then I'm going to tell you what one of the most famous minds in Hebrew, within the Hebrew thinking patterns, has to say about this specific verse. And it's going to be totally different than our English mind and what we think it means. You have to know the Hebrew words being used, everyone. You can't just go saying Hanukkah is evil, wicked, and this and that, because you are saying in English that dedication or the dedicated or all of that, you're saying that it is evil and wicked, and you yourself are going to fall into accountability for that, because the Hebrew word Hanukkah, Enoch is Hanuk, that is also connected to this word. People are saying that Hanukkah is nowhere in the scriptures. Yes, it is. It is everywhere in the Hebrew manuscripts. So Father, help us. Let's go ahead and launch into this. Father, in the name of Yahshua, I just pray that you would be with us as I just want to share with the brothers and sisters what this is all about and how much difference it makes when looking at it from the Hebrew perspective and the history that we have that has been recorded concerning this, what has turned into something that is purely traditional and with no merit whatsoever. But in its original form, it was attended by our Mashiach in the first century. It's undeniable. So, in the name of Yahshua, be with us, Father, as we begin to go over this very debatable thing right now within the brethren. Pray that you would lead, guide, and bless me. Bless my lips. Forgive me of any shortcomings. Forgive us all of any shortcomings. In the mighty name of Yahshua, hallelujah. All right. Now, so first of all, let's use a little bit of common sense here. Many are saying that it is not in the commanded Moedim. Therefore, it is more than likely from a pagan origin. Now, I want to approach this with this type of mentality. To those of you out there that are saying that Hanukkah is wicked, evil, and it comes from a pagan origin, that is not true because it comes from a Hebrew origin, the word itself. Now, the event that it is today, I do not think that we should be celebrating it with the 9-branch menorah. That's unscriptural. Yahweh never commanded us to make a 9-branch menorah. Never. So that's wrong. The 8 days, that could possibly be a myth because of they say the oil this, and it's just some history that's laid out there from the times of the Maccabees. Now, I want to ask this in all sincerity, anybody who's watching this or will watch it in the future. The reason why in the first century and prior to that they were doing this Feast of Dedication, which is also called the Feast of Lights and a few other things, the Feast of Dedication, it was in honor of Yahweh strengthening and giving the victory to a certain group of people to take back the temple. So this, in essence, in its roots, was something that the people of Yahweh done as a free gift offering because of the victory that he had given them. That is not a pagan origin. And you can look throughout the Tanakh, and it specifically says that we are to bring free will offerings to Yah. Now, that would be a personal celebration, everyone. Your free will offerings to be brought to Yahweh. We still do that whenever we gather and somebody wants to sing a song. They bring a song of praise. It's a free will offering. This, too, was a free will offering from people that believed that Yah had given them the victory. So there's really nothing pagan in that origin per se. Now, howbeit it has changed over the years. What it was in the first century is absolutely nothing like they've done now in modern day Judaism. And again, Judaism has changed it, and I'm going to be reading some history of that. Let's go ahead and begin with that. I'm going to be reading this is off of a Jewish website, which is haatzeret.com. And it says the obscure origins and evolution of the Hanukkah menorah. Now listen to this. On Hanukkah, Jews the world over light a menorah to commemorate a miracle that occurred at the height of the Maccabean revolution against the Greek oppressors in the 2nd century BCE. Now listen what this commentator says about it, and he's Jewish. But that is a post-fact explanation for a tradition whose origins are shrouded in mystery. When exactly did Jews start lighting menorahs? Today, usually 8-branched candelabra with the 9th shamash candle is unknown. There is no mention of menorahs in the earliest known account of the Hanukkah in 1 Maccabees, which describes the rededication of the Second Temple after the Maccabean victory. So this was just a feast of dedication, a free will thing, everyone. It was a free will thing. And in that first century, or in that second century account that is written in 1 Maccabees, there is no account of a 9-branch menorah. There is no account of 8 days being celebrated or anything like that. It says, nor does the text say, speaking of the Maccabean text, say how Hanukkah should be celebrated, though in all likelihood it was marked with animal sacrifice at the Jerusalem temple. And I did find some history that says there were sacrifices. Now, these, again, were not commanded, but free will sacrifices that were brought before Yahweh by his people. It was marked with animal sacrifice at the Jerusalem temple, as all other Jewish holidays at the time were celebrated. So where did the tradition of the menorah come from? Speaking of the 9-branch menorah, conservative Jewish authorities would have been unlikely to create a new tradition with no biblical reference. And this goes on to say at the top of the page here, ancient Jews also marked Hanukkah with fire, but the menorahs we know today, speaking of the 9-branch menorah, are a modern innovation. So, I also read some other articles that have very good points, and so it's pretty safe to say that somewhere between the 4th and 7th century of the Common Era is whenever this 9-branched, for the sake of argument, I'm just going to say between the 4th and 7th century of the Common Era, is during that time period is what it appears to, when it appears to have been created, this 9-branch menorah. So this would be a practice of Judaism, which is the Pharisees that came surfacing again underneath another title. Most modern day rabbis are Pharisees. Pharisees formed the Sanhedrin. So we could go into all that at a later time. Now that we have a little bit of the history, we can see that the way that it was celebrated in the days of Yahshua Messiah when he walked this earth, as recorded in John chapter 10, was nothing like what we see today. Now, the first thing I want to do is go to this argument that everybody's saying, do not add to the word which I command you, and do not take away from it, spoken about in Deuteronomy, Devarim chapter 4 and verse 2. Now, we need to understand what the author was actually speaking about here, and I'm going to read it to you out of the Tanakh. First, I'm going to read it word for word. Out of the scriptures. Do not add to the word which I command you, and do not take away from it, so as to guard the commands of Yahweh your Elohim, which I am commanding you. Okay, now, in the 3rd chapter, you'll see it says, but charge Yahushua and strengthen him and make him brave. See, there was this passage from chapter 3:21 through the end of the chapter, speaking about how Yahushua ben Nun was about to step into the position that Moshe had been in. And here it's recorded, do not add to the word which I commanded you, and do not take away from it. Right? Now, we also know that there's scriptural proof that Yahshua ben Nun, Yahushua, wrote in the same writings that Moses did. So it's not a contradiction if you read the Hebrew, because there's 2 different Hebrew phrases you'll know what word it's speaking about here if you read the Torah. Okay, and Samuel Raphael Hirsch is going to explain this in his commentary of the Torah. Okay, so let's go ahead and check that out. I'm going to read it to you right out of the Tanakh. Where it says in English, you shall not add to the word which I command you, neither shall ye diminish from it, is how this English translation reads of Deuteronomy 4, chapter 2. Excuse me, verse 2. In the English, or excuse me, in the Hebrew, it says, Lo tosifu al hadabar, asher anaki metzaveh etchem, velo tigriyu. I know I butchered that one. Sorry. Tigriyu miminu. So that's what's written in Hebrew. Now, please understand that he used specific words here. All right. And when he did, he was setting apart some specific things that were spoken about in all of the Devarim that had been spoken to them. Okay. Samson Raphael Hirsch, a Hebrew-speaking teacher, one of the most notorious men of his time and up to this very present age, says, every command which Elohim gives us, we are to carry out in its integrity. We are to allow no possibility thereby of any arbitrary alteration, no subjective addition or curtailment which might appeal to us, no more or less than the prescribed 4 paragraphs in the tefillin, 4 kinds of plants in the lulav, 4 double threads in the tzitzits, no more or less than the 3 prescribed sentences in the blessing pronounced by the priests, than the 1, 2, or 4 prescribed placings of the blood of the offering on the altar. You see, he's specifically laying out, and we're going to see why here in a moment, which words Moshe was actually addressing here. And you can tell by the way the Hebrew words that were used what he was specifically talking about. This conscientious keeping to not more and not less of fulfilling Yahweh's commands is just to have the result of making these commands realized in their full, complete integrity, unabridged and pure. For the most possible exact carrying out of the command and not out of unabashed attempts at reform. You see this? Listen to that again. For the most possible exact carrying out of the command and not out of unabashed attempts at reform does not come under this prohibition of these Hebrew words used here. So, what Moshe was saying, remember when we came to the mountain, right? There had to be a reformation of the plan that was initiated. Now, again, you can see this by the Hebrew words that he used. So they came to the mountain, and at the mountain, they were about to receive the Spirit of Yah. He was going to fill them with his seed, accept them as a bride, and overshadow them and instill this seed, spiritual seed within them, and consummate the marriage with them. But the building of the golden calf happened. So the priesthood right there was defiled because Aaron added to that. So then what did they have to do? They had to roam around out in the wilderness for 40 years Then there was a time of reformation in which they came into the land, but they were not to stay in the land. And they knew that, for Yahweh had already said that they were going to be scattered. So they knew the whole time that this was going to be temporary. So this is speaking, the Hebrew word used there is talking about in reformation. The warning our sages have observed with meticulous conscientiousness, and in all their traditions and explanations have kept very definitely the distinction between the way these Hebrew words described it and the other set of Hebrew words would describe it. This prohibition occurs again in chapter, then it goes on to tell you in other areas that these specific words were used. So what this historian is giving us the reasoning behind what was written. Because he used those specific words in Hebrew, he was talking about in times of reformation, because it had already been prophesied that they would be scattered. See, if you get your mind out of Christian theology, if you get your minds out of English only reading, and you begin to look at all of these wonderful things from a Hebrew perspective, then you begin to see another side of the story here. Now, so the next thing that was brought to my attention was, well, there's never really anywhere in the Torah a feast of dedication. Okay. Hallelujah. Thank you, guys. There was never really this type of feast of dedication mentioned. Feast of dedication is only used in the Brit. Now, and under those grounds, and we're talking about in English, and under those grounds, many are dismissing the validation of any type of celebration of what they now call Hanukkah. And that is an error. If you go to 2 Chronicles chapter 7, you will indeed see that is one place where the word feast and dedication are mentioned at the same time. But the word Hanukkah and Hanuk, Enach, however you want to pronounce that, are used, and its roots are used everywhere. And I submit to you that from what we're seeing, it's very apparent that they, with free will offerings, brought dedications to Yahweh numerous times. Numerous times. And it was still something that they were doing in the first century, everyone. People were bringing free will offerings out of their abundance, even to the temple when they would come to the feasts in the first century of the Common Era. Now that I've explained that from a Hebrew perspective, I want to take you to John chapter 10. And what is happening, let me explain this. People are saying that if you celebrate Hanukkah, that you're adding to the word of Yahweh, you're adding to the feast of Yahweh, but nowhere has anyone, I've never seen anyone say that the Hanukkah is a commanded gathering in Scripture. I don't see anybody claiming that. I don't claim it. We celebrated the first and last day yesterday here in our house. We get together, we light the real menorah, and we praise and thank Yahweh for all of the times that something was the tent of meeting in the wilderness when it was filled by his presence. That was a dedication to him. And whenever the second temple was erected, or the first temple was erected, and King Solomon, that's where you can find this feast and dedication in the same in 2 Chronicles chapter 7. So yes, there was a feast of dedication there as well. And you'll see free will offerings, sacrifices by the thousands being brought that was not commanded by Solomon. Solomon brought thousands of sacrifices, free will sacrifices, and Yahweh accepted them on that day. Now, was the dedication of the temple commanded by Yahweh? No, it was not. Yahweh did not command Solomon to build the temple. He allowed him to follow through with David, his brother or his father, his wishes to build the temple. He allowed it to be built. He never commanded it to be built. And he never commanded Solomon to bring one sacrifice. Now, howbeit that it was during the time of a feast, so there would have been commanded sacrifices lined up. But all of the sacrifices, thousands of them that was brought by Solomon, were unscriptural according to your theology. He brought thousands of sacrifices that Yahweh did not command as a free will offering. And Yahweh not only recognized them, but filled the temple with his presence. Okay, so the arguments here and saying that it's pagan, man, you better saying, when you say in English, Hanukkah is pagan, you know what you just did? You're saying, this is what he's hearing, everywhere where the word Hanukkah is in scripture is pagan, because you don't think it's used anywhere, but it is used everywhere. This is where the study of the Hebrew really enhances and clarifies a lot of the things that people are arguing over today. And I see the arguments and I'm like, why will people not learn to read Hebrew? What is wrong? I just don't understand it. But I've had more people over the past 3 or 4 weeks get a hold of me and say, will you please teach me how to use these books? And I praise Yahweh for that. Yeah, I will. I absolutely will. I'm going to go back into doing that, but I'm only going to do it to those that I know will use it properly, because I don't have time. I love him and I want to serve him in truth, and I don't want it to be the information that I share with people. I don't want it to be used against the flocks or the truth pertaining to Yahweh's word. Now, Yohanan, chapter 10, beginning of verse 22. I'm going to explain a few things here. It's very, very critical. And it's also very critical that I wear my glasses. All right? Now, it says, at that time, and many of you are seeing Feast of Dedication, my version says Hanukkah, came to be in Jerusalem. Remember, the history shows that there would have been no 9-branch menorah, right? This whole 8-day event is not described in Maccabees. And where they were gathered is very, very important. If you look at the history of Solomon's porch and what it represented and what happened there, it really, really adds to what is happening here. For Yahshua to walk across the Solomon's porch during this time period is phenomenal. And it was winter. And Yahshua was walking in the set-apart place in the porch of Solomon. So here you have the King of Kings walking across the porch of Solomon, who was a king. So the Yahudim surrounded him and said to him, "Why aren't you coming to Hanukkah?" Just kidding. So the Yahudim surrounded him and said to him, "How long do you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, say so plainly." Yahshua answered them, "I have told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness concerning me, but you do not believe because you are not of my sheep, as I said to you. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give them everlasting life. It's talking about the word here. Yahshua is ministering on Solomon's porch. If you go check out the history, that's where everybody began to gather during these events, was at Solomon's porch. He didn't go in looking for the headship to start bashing on them for this event. He knew the headship would come to him with questions. He was there with people like you and me. That's where all of the people would gather at these events, was on Solomon's porch. He was kicking it there with his people. And he's telling these guys, you are not my people. Verse 32, Yahshua answered them, many good works I have shown you from my Father, because of which of these works do you stone me? Yahudim answered him, saying, we did not stone you for a good work, but for blasphemy, and because you bring a man, you being a man, make yourself Elohim. You see, you notice how they worded that? He said that I and my Father are one. This is Echad, and it doesn't mean one in unity. That Strong's definition is terrible. It means the number one in essence. We are in essence one. In other words, he was saying, I am the essence of the Father. Woo, hallelujah. But so you'll notice here, all the way through this whole chapter, all he's arguing with them about is their unbelief in him after he has shown them and explained to them who and what he is. And they continued to live in disbelief. Verse 34 says, Yahshua answered them, is it not written in your own Torah, I said, you are Elohim? If he called them Elohim, to whom the word of Elohim came, it is impossible for the scripture to be broken. Do you say of him who the Father set apart and sent into the world, you are blaspheming, because I said, I am the Son of Elohim? If I do not do the works of my Father, do not believe me. But if I do, though you do not believe me, believe the works, so that you know and believe that the Father is in me and I in him. You see, the Word in the beginning was in the Father. And then he spoke, and the Word came outside or came forth from him. It's not an entity. The Word is the essence of the one who breathed it. Not once did the Word that was manifested in the flesh throughout this whole chapter take up an issue with the celebration, the way they did it in the first century, of what we call the Feast of Dedication, the Feast of Lights, or Hanukkah. He did not. And if you say that he did, you are guilty of adding to the word of the Word. Yahshua was the Word made flesh. And the Word was bearing testimony about itself. And if you say that he condemned something when he didn't, you are guilty of adding to the Word. Do you see the two differences here once we learn the Hebrew behind it and actually look on what happened that day? We can turn around and we can say that the people who are speaking, saying that Yahshua had a problem with Hanukkah, is adding to the Word, because he did not. Nowhere in the whole of the scriptures or the Bible that you hold in your hand does it ever speak against this celebration the way it was in the first century. All right. So, I mean, I read to you out of Deuteronomy, right out of the Tanakh. I took you to the Hebrew mind, and we gave you the interpretation Hebraically of the words that were used in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 2. And it doesn't mean what other people are saying it to mean. So they're pulling those things out of context. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? So I humbly submit to everyone who's watching or will watch this, we'll be pulling it off of Facebook and uploading it to YouTube as well. Anybody who will watch it in the future, the bare facts of this whole topic is that Yahshua never condemned it. He brought up several different issues with them. And it was not over the dedication. It just wasn't. To say so is adding to the word of Yah when it was manifested in the flesh, albeit. It's there's my 2 cents, 3 cents on it Hebraically. Other than that, you can't post comments on Facebook, or excuse me, on our YouTube page, but you can comment on it here. And please keep it kosher if you do, because if you get into arguing and talking nasty and everything, I'll just block you, because all of the people that study with us here at Seekers of Yahweh Ministries know that, you know, we're not going to be the source of a place where everybody can get together and argue over things. And I also would like to add that Brother Dennis Frisbee just wrote up a wonderful article on this in Beginning Anew, Yahweh's Assembly in Messiah, their newsletter. So if you get that, or you haven't got it yet, it's on the way. I read through about half of it when we got it just a couple of hours ago. And that's what actually reminded me to, I've had several people ask me to do this video. And so here it is. I believe that the information that we see proves that Hanukkah was celebrated in the 1st century. Yahshua participated in it. He was amongst the people at the Porch of Solomon. And it was a 1-day event, not an 8-day event. There was no 9-branch menorah. All of that stuff is modern traditional things that have been injected into it by Judaism. And we should not be following those types of things. So I do pray that this clears up some things and causes some to kind of question what they've believed in the past about it. But most of all, I pray that it uplifts our King and our walk with him. So please share the video everywhere where you see this being debated, and just ask them to please consider what we've gone through here today. And they can private message me or get a hold of me anytime. And I have a lot more that we could add to this that I will not do at this time, because this is going to be a Seeker's quick study. One of those supposed to be a quick study. So I don't want to drag in very much longer. So again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Those of you that will watch the recorded version, may Yahweh bless you and keep you. All of those that were watching live, I want to thank you. Please share. And we'll see you guys again very soon. Yahweh bless you.